Hi, my name is Allyson Drake, and I'm the founder and executive director here at Full Circle. I'm excited to share some great resources and information with you tonight about finding meaning after loss. Most of the information that I'm sharing with you tonight is from a book called Finding Meaning by David Kessler. I highly recommend this book if you are interested in reading anything about meaning making after a significant loss. I also recommend a podcast that he recently did with Brene Brown about finding meaning. It's on Brown's podcast that she is offering basically anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And then David Kessler's website, grief.com, is a great resource as well. So I have a few slides to share with you tonight, and I look forward to sharing the concept of meaning making with you. Again, finding meaning beyond the pain of grief. And then I have the resource or the source for you listed there as well. So throughout this conversation tonight, we are going to talk a lot about quotes and different things that David shares in his book. The first one I want to share with you tonight is about meaning. So meaning is a reflection of the love we have for those that we have lost. Meaning is the sixth stage of grief where the healing often resides. So to explain a little bit about the sixth stage of grief, David Kessler did a lot of work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. He was a student of hers for a long time, and they co-authored books together and articles. And he worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to really talk and explain the true meaning behind her 5 stages of grief. When she originally set up these stages of grief, she was talking about the dying process, not actually the grieving process. She was talking about what individuals that are currently dying or going through a terminal illness, the stages that they go through when they are grieving the end of their life. And then upon further research and just writings and things that she and David Kessler had worked on together, they really started talking about those stages when you're looking at grieving as something that is not linear, as something that is not, you go through each of them and you check the box. They talked a lot about how her 5 stages of grief were really stages that you move back and forth through. And so towards the end of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's life, David started talking with her about what he called the 6th stage of grief, which is finding meaning. And so after Kubler-Ross had died, David, as he started writing this book and doing many more publications about meaning making, he approached Kubler-Ross's foundation as well as her family and got their permission to name meaning as the 6th stage of grief. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So his whole premise is there is definitely more to grief than just the pain. So a few points that I wanted to cover from his book and his teachings is healing is a process that we go through. It's not forgetting. It's not about forgetting our loved ones. Healing is not taking away that connection with our loved one. What it really is building that connection with our loved one just in a different way. So we can transform our grief through meaning making, but he's very specific throughout his book, talking about how it's our own time and it's on our own schedule. It's not something that someone else can tell us about how to find meaning. It's not something we can hurry up through to do. It is on our own time and our own schedule. And David often talks about how the pain of grief is a necessity. It's something that we have to walk through. It's something that we have to experience so that we can come out on the other side of it and try to find that meaning, which is a really important part of our healing. So meaning helps us make sense of a grief that seems so meaningless, a death that may seem so meaningless. It helps us find meaning in such a painful process. So finding meaning in loss empowers us to find a path forward. It helps us make sense of the grief. And he states that grief is a reflection of love. The pain is part of our love, and making meaning is part of our love for the person that died. Throughout podcasts and different things that I've listened to where David Kessler was speaking about meaning, he always emphasizes the fact that loss is never a gift. It's never meant to be a lesson. That's not how we should look at a loss. That's not how we should look at death of somebody. It's not, oh, I'm so happy that that happened because now I've learned this, or my life has this meaning. That is not what he's talking about at all. He talks about love. I mean, loss is something that happens. It's not a gift. It's not a lesson. But meaning is something that we ourselves make happen after a loss of a loved one. So I wanted to make sure I said that when you're talking about meaning making, you're not changing into something like, oh, I view this as a gift, or I view this as a lesson that was given to me. That's not it at all. It's just now that we have this loss and something that happened and we had this pain because of that loss, what meaning are we going to make happen because this happened to us? So a quote that talks a little bit more about that: healing doesn't mean the loss didn't happen. It just means that the loss no longer controls us. I think that's a beautiful way to explain what healing is. That anybody that has walked the path of grief knows that healing is not about forgetting. It's not about moving on and forgetting about our loved one or pretending the loss didn't happen. Healing is about that the pain no longer controls us. The suffering no longer controls us. So what is meaning? Again, like I said before, meaning is relative and personal. Only you can find your own meaning. It's not up to someone else to tell us what the meaning is around all of our losses. Meaning takes time. It's not something that you discover soon after the death of your loved one. And again, as David says, you have to go through that pain. You have to go through the suffering. And before you may be ready to find that meaning. Sometimes people don't find it months or even years after a loss. So meaning doesn't require understanding. It's not necessary to understand why someone died in order to find meaning. When working with many, many grieving people over the years, it's always many people have a question of why. Why did that happen? And as many of you who are listening to this know, the majority of the time we are not able to find out that why. There's just no why that will allow us the understanding of why that death occurred. And one thing that he talks about throughout his book, the book I'm showing you again right here, he has chapters on suicide, he has chapters on overdose, child loss, losses of babies. He talks throughout his book about cases about homicide. And many of these tragic, sudden deaths are the deaths that we ask why. Why did that happen? And so he talks a lot about the why you must answer is not why your loved one died, but why you were here and why you now live. So the questions that he poses are, why are you here? What meaning can you bring to the rest of your life? And what meaning can you find in those that are still living? So even when you do find that meaning, you will never, ever feel that it was worth the cost of losing your person, losing your loved one to find that meaning. And he says, no matter what, in this book, he talks a lot about his son, who was a young adult who died a few years ago of a drug overdose, an accidental overdose. And he talks a lot about how he has found a lot of meaning since this loss. And he's written this book and he's done a lot of speaking engagements. And I believe he's touched a lot of people because of the work that he has done. But he says nothing will ever, ever be worth the death of his son. So no matter all these lessons he's taught people, all of these people that have read his book, the publication of his book, all of the speaking engagements and the workshops and people that he's able to talk to, none of it will ever feel that it was worth the cost of losing his son. So wanted to make sure that I covered that piece as well. And when we can find meaning, oftentimes that means we're able to move forward in our grief and not become stuck in our grief. So another quote from David's book, where am I trying to find meaning? The death, the loss, the event, the life of the person I loved? Or am I trying to find meaning in my own life after the loss? And his answer is yes, 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 yes. And yes, you can find meaning in all of those things. So what does meaning look like? Um, so after reading his book, listening to a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of articles that he's written, reading all of the wonderful information on his website, I tried to put together a list for you of what meaning does look like. Just a few examples. And again, this is not an exclusive list. This is something that hopefully will allow you to start thinking about what meaning looks like in your life by taking some of these examples or creating some examples of your own. But what does meaning look like? It can be finding gratitude for the time that we had with our loved one. So he talks a lot about how his son was, I believe, in his early 20s. And after a little bit of time after his son's death, he was able to find gratitude for those 21 years that he had with his son. So finding gratitude for the time we actually had, that they were our mother, our father, our sister, our brother, our child, our best friend, whatever it may be, being able to find gratitude that that person was in your life for the time that they were. So by finding gratitude for the support others are giving you during the loss, the friends, the family members, the people that are in our different spiritual organizations, people that are in our neighborhoods, our workplace, finding gratitude for the support that they are giving you, and also the people that you may be meeting and coming in contact with because of the loss. That can be your meaning. It can be finding gratitude and being thankful for the people that are supporting you. Another way to find meaning is realizing our shortness of life, the value of our life. Life doesn't always last as long as we want it to. And realizing the things that we're grateful for, because we never know when our life is going to end or the life of our loved ones are going to end. So just meaning can be finding realization of that and not taking days for granted. Also, meaning can be creating a change in your life to honor your loved one. Transformation of your life can bring meaning to theirs. So something that you were proud of that your loved one did, maybe incorporating that into your life. A bad habit that you have that's putting your physical health into jeopardy. Maybe you're transforming your life and you're trying to stop smoking or become healthier or exercising more, or whatever it may be, and transforming your life or things in your life that can bring meaning to your loved one's life. Let's say that your loved one ran marathons or ran races and you've never run a day in your life, but you want to be healthier, so you're honoring their life by training for a race or something like that. Another way to find meaning is honoring and showing love for those who are still in your life, making the most of relationships that are still in your life. So never leaving anything unsaid, making sure you're telling people how you feel about them, making sure you're telling people that you love them, taking time in your life to spend time with those people. Whatever it may be, that's a huge way to find meaning after the death of a loved one. Doing something that honors your loved one, such as, again, the way you live your life, treating others the way that they did. Let's say that your spouse who recently died was always the one in your family that celebrated birthdays. They were huge. Like, they would do so much and go out of their way for people's birthdays. Well, maybe that's something that you now do to honor them, is you take the lead on that, and you're the one who celebrates the birthdays and gets friends and families together, or just makes a big deal out of birthdays. Maybe that's how you make meaning of their loss, or making meaning of their life is probably a better way to say that. Or being more present for others that are grieving. So you're going to honor your loved one. You're going to find meaning in your loss by down the road being more present for others who are grieving. You get it, you understand it. So you're the one who shows up. You're the one who's present for people who are grieving. Another way to find meaning is to find a way to commemorate their life. So something big, something small. If they loved going to a certain college's basketball games, again, small, but you decide to go to 1 or 2 games that year, the next year, to honor or commemorate their life. Big things you can do: create a foundation, create a movement, walk in a cause that was important to them, walk in their fundraiser and raise money for it, do a project in their honor. It can be something even as small as they used to volunteer at a homeless shelter. So now you have a project in your neighborhood where you're gathering supplies for that same homeless shelter, and you're donating them in their honor. So again, it can be big or small, but finding ways to commemorate their life, and that's a way that you can really find meaning. So again, in thinking about if you were grieving the death of a loved one, how can you explore meaning? It's not always right there in front of us how we're going to make meaning from our loss. And so David Kessler on his website in one of his workshops that I did on virtually, he poses some questions to consider, things that you can think about while you're exploring your meaning of your loss. So you can take a look at these questions, you can journal about them, you can pick a few of them that speak to you that may help you really consider how you are going to find meaning after your loss. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to review some of these. So in closing tonight, and again, this is just a general introduction to meaning, and I highly recommend checking out his book, checking out the podcast with Brene Brown that David Kessler does as a guest on her podcast, his website grief.com, or just Google searching David Kessler and meaning. There's just a copious amount of articles that you can read to enrich your understanding of meaning. But I'll close tonight with this quote. Ultimately, meaning comes through finding a way to sustain your love for the person after their death while you're moving forward in your life. Although your relationship with your loved one will change after your death, it will also continue no matter what. The challenge will be to make that connection a meaningful one. Again, that's by David Kessler. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about meaning. I hope I've made you think a little bit about how you're going to incorporate meaning into your grief work. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts you want to share, again, I'm Allyson Drake from Full Circle. I'm their executive director, and my email is Allyson, ALLYSON, @fullcirclegc.org. Thanks for spending some time with me.